This is the Soyuz 013A Ambisonic microphone. And right now you're hearing this ambisonic signal decoded down to stereo. So this will work perfectly on your headphones or your speakers. So what's an ambisonic microphone? An ambisonic microphone and ambisonics is a technology that's been around since the 1970s. It's been around for a while. And basically what you're doing is you're just taking an array of microphones and decoding it with math after the fact so that you can manipulate the signal and basically in post after the fact be able to pan around and figure out where you want the microphone to face. And it also, obviously, it's picking up everything. So the really cool thing about ambisonics is that it gives you a very accurate representation of wherever you're recording. So I think most people assume that ambisonics is more of a kind of clinical tool than something that you can use creatively. Hopefully by the end of this video, you'll realize that there are a ton of creative ways that you can use this microphone. I'm only going to scratch the surface, but at the very least, I'm going to give you a crash course on ambisonics. So the 013A, Soyuz has taken 4 of their 013 FET small caps, which technically it's a small cap, but it's a much bigger capsule than most small caps. They've taken 4 channels of that 013 FET and shoved it into a bomblet body, more or less. So this is like owning 4 013 FETs crammed into an ambisonic array. So, I mean, technically you can just use one channel of this and it would be like using one channel of an 013. I've even messed around with angling 2 of these in XY to just use it as a regular XY mic. So if you're curious about buying one of these, just keep in mind that it can be used as a mono mic or a stereo mic or ambisonics. It's very flexible. So the 013A is a first order ambisonic mic. So what does that mean? That means first order ambisonics is 4 channels. So you've got 4 microphones arranged in this array. A first order ambisonic mic is kind of considered the bare minimum that you need in order to decode to ambisonics correctly. And when you get into higher order ambisonics, there's some mics out there that have, exceeding 64 channels, I think. It gets pretty ridiculous. Again, I think a lot of people have kind of brushed off ambisonics in the creative community because a lot of people that get into this are more interested in capturing, soundscapes for movies or recording classical music very clinically and accurately in beautiful environments like concert halls. I don't see a ton of people like recording acoustic guitars with ambisonic microphones to mix into music, but you can do that, and we'll get to that. So this is a first order ambisonic microphone. The great thing about it is that, again, with math, you send those 4 signals into your DAW, you decode them correctly with plugins, and then you can manipulate the signal however you want. And Soyuz has actually included a great one sheet with the math or with the mic that explains all of this for you. So again, I think one of the first mindset things to get around is that, ambisonics is just more of a tool to do weird things like soundscapes and classical music. That is not the case. I've recorded a whole song with this microphone using it on every source like I usually do on my other mic reviews. I'm going to include full session files and you'll be able to download them as ambisonic files and manipulate them with a free version of the plugin that Soyuz has done with a company called Audio Brewers. So you will get to hear this mic creatively. And then I think this will probably be a 2-section video and it's going to be a bit long. First off, we'll start out just doing the typical full song, recorded front to back with this mic, and I'll show you different sources and how it can sound. And then after that, we'll get into some more creative ways that you can use this mic in music. So again, this is probably going to be a bit of a crash course in ambisonics. You can skip around if you want, if you already know a lot about ambisonics. A lot of you probably know more about me. But I do want to get across that this is totally capable of being used in a creative recording studio environment for normal music. And it, to me, just after using this for a week or two, it's very different than stereo. And so it's definitely going to add some flexibility to, all you people that already have a complete mic locker. They're like, oh man, do I really need another weird mic? Yes. All right. So let's go ahead. The first thing I want to do, let's just listen to some music. I brought in a local band named Sylamore Special. It's a bluegrass band. I had them all crowded around this mic doing a live take. So let's go ahead and listen to that real quick. And I've decoded it and mixed it in stereo. So let's take a listen to that. So you just heard the band Sylamore Special. They're absolutely amazing. The mic sounded great, but I always want to emphasize when I do kind of one mic recordings that for this to sound good, it really does rely on the band being able to control their dynamics and everything really well. And bluegrass bands are a perfect example of being able to pull something off like this well around one mic, because those are a bunch of instrumentalists and singers that are used to playing in rooms together and, having to learn how to play with each other well and mix themselves in the room. So this captured their performance and their technique and everything really well. So let's talk about how to decode this correctly. Now, when you look at Ambisonics, you'll see two terms thrown around, A format and B format. You basically have to take A format Ambisonics from a mic and convert it to B format in order to deal with it correctly. So A format is anything coming from like a first order ambisonic mic like the 013A. The 013A is putting out 4 channels in what you would call A format. Now, I mentioned Audio Brewers. They're a really amazing company, and Alejandro that runs that is just a genius and very knowledgeable about ambisonic stuff. So make sure you check out all the cool Audio Brewers plugins and especially their YouTube channel if you want to learn more about ambisonics. I've spent a long time watching all his videos. He's very knowledgeable. So the first plugin that we have is the transcoder. So what we have to do is we have to put the transcoder first in our signal chain so that that converts to B format. And the B format that we're going to be working in for the most part is Ambix. If you've never dealt with Ambisonics before, this is probably a little overwhelming and you're like, what the hell is all this stuff? Ambix sounds like some planet from Star Wars. I get it. All you need to know is, in a nutshell, if I have to simplify this extremely, A format is basically how you choose to plug in the microphone capsules and in what order. And again, Soyuz has a one sheet that walks through all of this to tell you how to do this correctly and deal with the plugins. So if you buy the mic, make sure you look at that. The one sheet is very well done, and it distills a whole complicated process into a couple of pages that make a lot of sense. So the transcoder goes on first, and there's a couple of things we need to do. The first thing we need to do is make sure that we tell the transcoder, hey, this is how I position the mic. You have upright, you have looking straight forward, which is how I'm going to transcode this audio when I go back and edit it because the mic's pointed right at me. And then you have upside down. Now, essentially what that means, let's take this mic for example. When you tell the transcoder, hey, I had the mic placed like that, basically what that's going to say is when you transcode this to Ambix, it's going to say, hey, the mic was upside down. So when it's positioned like this and you get the file, stuff coming from this direction is top, that's bottom, that's left, that's right. Now, if we have the mic recording this way and we had it facing upright in the transcoder, when you got that information, this would be front, and this would be back, that would be left, that would be right. So keep in mind that you just need to remember how you recorded your source so you can transcode it correctly. The other two controls that we'll see in here is an input and output, and that's just to gain stage correctly, because that's especially important when you're dumbing it down to like a stereo signal. Just kind of watch your kind of, gain staging. There's two options here. You have monitor and you have quality. Quality is what you're going to want to stay in most of the time. That is decoding this signal in the highest quality way possible. But there's a lot of delay involved with that because it takes a lot of processing power. So if for some instance you want to actually send your artist an ambisonic mix that's been dumbed down to stereo in their headphones while they're tracking, you actually have this monitor option that will dumb down the quality a little bit, but there's no delay, so that you can actually monitor in real time and there'll be as low of a delay as possible depending on how your interface deals with stuff. So if you need to monitor that directly in real time, monitor's a good option, but when you're mixing and doing everything else, quality is what you're going to want to go for. Now, Ambix and Fuma are two possible B format outputs that have kind of been popular in ambisonics over the years. Just for the most part, I'm going to stick with Ambix, but this is basically more or less just saying, hey, I spit out those 4 channels in this order. The only other thing to keep in mind with the transcoder plugin is that it's important that you use this specific plugin with the Soyuz mic, because Soyuz sent this to Alejandro at Audio Brewers, and he figured out all the specific math that was involved to transcode for this specific mic in terms of where the capsules are placed and how far away and everything they are from each other. So regardless, if you find some plugins in the future that you like better for decoding ambisonics, that's fine. You can use whatever you want, but it is essential that you use this Soyuz plugin when you record with that mic. So that's the first thing in our signal chain. The next thing that you'll have is the decoder. Now this is the Soyuz decoder that comes with the mic. It has a lot more options in terms of what you decode down to, and you can see we have a ton of surround sound and Dolby Atmos formats. If you're just interested in downloading the session files that I'll provide for the song that I recorded, you will get a light version of this plugin that looks very similar. So, the next plugin that you need after you've told the transcoder to do its thing correctly and output to Ambix is your decoder. You'll find that there are a lot of decoder options on the market that can translate that Ambix signal correctly. Audio Brewers is freaking awesome. Like I know Soyuz picked them, so I mean I'm basically pitching you what the company decided. But when Soyuz talked about this mic like a year ago before they released details about, we're gonna work with Audio Brewers or anyone, I had found Audio Brewers when I started doing research on Ambisonics, and they're awesome. So I would check out all their other plugins as well. You will get these 2 plugins for free when you get the mic. Audio Brewers makes a ton of other really, really cool Ambisonic plugins that let you manipulate the signal, so be sure to check them out. I think they're a great company. So the decoder plugin will essentially, after the fact, let you kind of rotate things around and recenter. One of the really cool aspects of Ambisonics that I've been experimenting with is panning inside of the Ambisonic mic as opposed to panning with your panning knobs in the DAW. Now, if you just it's a stereo file, so if you just pan one side off to the right, it really shifts the image really hard, and you can, like normal, when you normally mix, you can get really wide soundscapes. The interesting thing about keeping your panners hard out in your DAW and then panning in here is that it's essentially like if your head was this mic, you're turning your head. So you're still getting some room tones and stuff off to this side, but you're just rotating the signal. So if you want to pan a guitar to one side in the song, you can use the panners in your DAW if you want and do it that way. But I would suggest trying it in the plugin as well and listening to the difference. It's different. It's almost like moving the mic. So that's a really fascinating part of Ambisonics that I encourage everyone to experiment with when you download the session files. Now, the one other thing that we should talk about is inside of this decoder, for stereo, to go down to 2 channels, you actually have the option for stereo, and you also have an option for headphones. Now, Ambisonics is a lot more accurate when you listen to it in headphones than when you listen to it on a pair of speakers. And headphones, for a lot of people, when you listen to an ambisonic signal, you can actually kind of hear something traveling behind you and above you and below you. That doesn't translate as well on speakers. So depending on what your purpose was for your ambisonic recording and what you're going to do with it, you'll want to decide in the decoder when you go down to 2 channels if you want to use it for stereo or headphones. Now, what I've found over the past week or 2 is that specifically for music and recording instruments and mixing instruments for a stereo mix, I preferred the stereo option for the most part because that translates more accurately to speakers. And when you look at this rotation dummy head in the plugin, you can actually look. When we do stereo, the panning is a little bit more narrow than when it's set to headphones. Because when you're doing it in headphones, that's kind of where it's just like recreating a binaural head. Your ears are over here. In the real world, the speakers are out in front of you. So that would be something to experiment with. But for the most part, when I was working with all of the instrument tracks and stuff that I recorded, when I was mixing in stereo, I found that things tended to sound a little bit more upfront and punchy when I kept everything in stereo. But there's no right or wrong here. Experiment with both and see what you think. But I'll just warn you that a lot of times when you get something sounding really good in headphones with the headphone option, it doesn't translate onto speakers as well. But I have found the reverse, that when you get something sounding good in the stereo option on your speakers, sounds pretty good on headphones as well, but obviously it's not going to be as wide of a soundscape in headphones when you have it set to stereo. So those are your options for decoding. Again, I would suggest you take a look at all the stuff that Audio Brewers does, because they do some really amazing plugins for manipulating stuff after the fact in Ambisonics. One other company that I want to make you aware of that I've found that I liked is called Red Rock Sound. Now, this plugin probably looks familiar to you. It's an EQ plugin. The Audio Brewers stuff, they still have some really cool creative plugins, especially if you want to get into like surround sound delays and stuff. It's amazing. If you're a dummy like me that's mixed in stereo their whole life and you're like, hey, I want a tube EQ that works in the ambisonic world, all the Red Rock stuff, I think, is compatible with Ambisonics. So when you look at this signal flow here, you'll see that I placed this plugin between the transcoder and the decoder. The decoder is dumbing things down to stereo. So in between these two, we are still in the Ambisonics world. One cool thing that I've experimented with is actually being able to split the ambisonic signal into kind of a mid-side processing. So when you take stuff in the transcoder and you decode it to ambics, when you bring up one of the Red Rock Sound plugins and tell it to go into a 4-channel mode, what you can do is you can split stuff up in this FX section. So out of our 4 channels, I've said, hey, first of all, I want you to just process channel 1, which when you're decoded down to ambics is your mid signal. The 3 other signals actually translate in a way to all your side signals. So in essence, what I can do is I can say, hey, in the mid signal, I would like to attenuate a little bit of bass and get rid of some bass in the mid signal. And then on my sides, all 3 of those, I would like to boost the bass a little bit. Now, we're getting into philosophies of ambisonics at this point. The problem with manipulating things this way is that when you start messing with the mid-side processing of an ambisonic mic, you end up destroying the accuracy of how it captured things. It will not be accurate. Now, that's not to say that it can't sound really cool, but just keep in mind there's a bunch of different trains of thought on how to use ambisonics. So when you start manipulating stuff in weird ways like this with ambisonic signals, you're destroying the accuracy of that ambisonic signal. But when it comes to mixing and music, that's subjective. So you can decide, hey, I've destroyed the accuracy of the stereo image, but it sounds really damn good to me. That's okay, but just keep in mind that when you start futzing with stuff like this, weird things can happen, but sometimes weird's good. So I know that was really long and drawn out, but I wanted to make sure that you understood kind of the general layout of how you needed to, split things up, because you can, if you lay things out this way where you have the transcoder and the decoder and leave some space, you can still manipulate the signal in the full ambisonic, arena. And then after your decoder that's dumbed it down to stereo, you can put your normal stereo tracks. Now that you kind of understand the workflow and how you're going to decode and deal with these signals, let's just go ahead and start listening to individual instruments and jump into the whole song that I recorded with just this mic. The first thing that I started with was piano because it's a physically larger instrument with a lot of just frequency information. And so I was kind of curious to see how it would image a piano as you get the mic closer and further back, and how things like proximity effect reacted with something like an ambisonic mic. The interesting thing that I found out really quickly was that, unfortunately, this mic, because it picks up everything, it's kind of like Omni on steroids. It is going to reveal every little issue with your room. There were spots where I placed mics on instruments all the time where all of a sudden I was hearing a little bit of a flutter very, very quietly. And sure enough, when I sat there and snapped my fingers or clapped a little bit, there was just some spots where there's a little bit of a flutter between the ceiling and the floor. So that was frustrating, but it is what it is. And, lots of ways you can work around this. My solution was that I have a bunch of movable acoustic pianos. So these are all GIK piano or GIK panels. The first one that I have is called, I can't remember what it's called actually off the top of my head, but it's just a small little vocal booth. I was able to position that above the mic to help deal with any reflections from the ceiling and the floor. Once I dealt with that and got one panel above it to deal with a small flutter issue that I had with my ceiling and floor, the piano sounded good, but I wanted it just to sound a little bit more intimate and closer. And so the interesting thing is that the proximity effect on this mic reacts like all the other mics I'm used to. You get it closer to the source, you pick up more low end, and it sounds closer. But the funny thing is, the room tone doesn't really dissipate at all when you get it closer to a source. So I found out very quickly that in order to get the sounds that I had in my head that I'm used to getting, I kind of had to not only manipulate the position of the mic, but I had to manipulate the acoustics of my space as well. So I would say that's just interesting tidbit for everyone to think about if you're going to buy this mic, because it's a bit of a learning curve, but once you start to understand it, you get really cool results that can be very different than typical stereo. So I'll shut up. Let's listen to piano. I try to play piano. I get close some days, not other days. So I realized that, shaker isn't the most exciting musical instrument to start with, but I think it's the perfect starting point to get into ambisonics and ambisonic mics specifically for recording music. Right now you're kind of hearing my voice off to the left side of the mic. If this was the head and it's looking that way, you're kind of hearing me off to the left and kind of to the rear. Now what I'm going to do is in post, I'm going to rotate this signal so that now I'm not coming from the left side, but we've rotated it. Almost like if you were standing here, you rotated your head. Now you're hearing me in the center of the image. So that's one of the cool things you can do. You can manipulate this either which way to kind of change the perspective. One of the cool things you can do with Ambisonics is that you can kind of, do things in 360 and actually mimic kind of walking around. It sounds a little different than how it would sound with a normal like 2-channel stereo mic. So I don't know if this is going to work out well in the context of the song, but one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do the normal shaker just as a center kind of shaker, and then you can pan it however you want. I'm also going to play around with me doing shaker while I'm walking around the mic. It might work out musically, it might not, but at any point, it sounds cool. So we'll try it. So here's shaker kind of center. So it might be something cool to experience. I'll probably provide both files so you can play around and decide what you want to do, but I couldn't record a song with an ambisonic mic without doing something funky like spaceship noises zooming around your head. So you'll have both files. You can decide what you do with those. Choose your own adventure. Use them, don't use them. Let's listen to a cooler instrument. After I figured all that stuff out on piano and kind of got my mind around how I was going to have to start dealing with this mic better moving forward, I moved to drums next. And drums, I kind of ran into the same I wouldn't call it an issue, but same hurdle. I got it sounding good, but there was just a little bit too much room tone and it just sounded a little bit too open. And I wanted it just a tad more closed in sounding and maybe wanted the drums to sound a little bit more punchy. So at that point, I kind of positioned panels the same way I did with piano. I kind of dealt with some top reflections and put some bigger panels in on the sides. And at that point, I was like, man, I wish I would have recorded and filmed a comparison of the piano with the panels and without the panels, the acoustic panels. But I think on drums, it's going to be a lot more obvious what the panels did sound wise. And I think the biggest thing it did was it just made the drums sound a little bit more punchier and a little bit more in your face. These aren't drastic things. I don't want to blow any of this out of proportion and say it's going to pick up all your room and, it's death, dying, and brimstone. These aren't big issues. This is kind of, this sounds good. I want to tweak a little bit and kind of hone in on this sound and just, sprinkle on that last little 10%. So now that you've heard the drums, let's go ahead and listen to a comparison of the drums with the acoustic panels around it and without them. got all the keeper vocal takes recorded for this song last night, but I don't know about anyone else, but man, allergies are kicking my butt lately, so excuse me if I squeak or do anything weird. I'm in a pretty rough state this morning. So it was hard getting the camera shoved in here with this vocal booth that I made for the mic. It's been interesting kind of learning this mic and, gain an idea of how it works and how to place it on stuff. I wanted the vocals to sound a little bit more intimate and dead, so a lot of times that just translates into maybe getting up closer to the mic or singing a little quieter or something like that, but there's still a definite proximity effect with this mic. But the interesting thing is, because it's just kind of picking up everything, even when you get up closer to the mic and kind of, try to get more intimate with it, phrasing, when you try to make things sound more intimate, you're still picking up your acoustical environment very clearly. So I definitely had to utilize all my panels and kind of get everything dead to get a deader sounding vocal, but it's been interesting. Anyway, let's see if I can limp through some vocals real quick so you can hear this on vocals. No one ever tells you moving to a small town, you'll be everything wrong with the world outside those county lines. Everybody tries to sell you in a small town, from chemtrails to wedding bells and herbal remedies. A pink Mary Kay SUV, rolling coal in front of some hybrid freak with a California license plate. That's all the isolated vocals you're going to get from me this morning. Let's keep moving. That's more or less all of the instrumentation for the song. Now I'm going to play the full song front to back with a little video montage, and you're going to hear a mix that I've done of the song. As per usual, I'm going to include full session files of the song that I've recorded, but I just want to reiterate, because this is going to be a little bit different, you do need to have some basic understanding of what I've done to the files and what you need to do to the files when you get them. So when you download these, I'm going to have them laid out in a Pro Tools session. I think inside of the audio file, you're going to end up with a single audio file for all of those instruments, but it's going to include 4 audio channels in it. And here's what I've done on my end. Because there is a transcoder plugin that you have to put on first that Audio Brewers has designed specifically for this mic, where they've done the math based on the capsule distances and everything. They have transcoded that into an Ambix file format. Ambix is probably the most common way to transcode Ambisonic files. So because there is not a way for you to demo the transcoder plugin specifically for this mic that Soyuz and Audio Brewers did, because I can't give you a demo of that plugin, I have burnt that in and bounced it out. So what you're going to end up with is a 4-channel audio file that has been decoded to Ambix. Now, that would usually be the first plugin that you put on each source. The second plugin will be your decoder that they've also done with Audio Brewers. Soyuz has created a demo, a light version that's free, that will be able to take that Ambix signal and let you pan things around and decode it to stereo if you want correctly. So a couple of things. Just make sure that you understand that I have decoded each track with the specific transcoder plugin. When you get that file, you need to download, and I'll put a link in the description, you need to download the light free version of the decoder plugin that Soyuz and Audio Brewers has done. And if you download it and use this in Pro Tools for my session, I'll have that plugin on there, so make sure you download it. That way you'll be able to pan this around and decode it to stereo correctly. Or if you've got like a Dolby Atmos setup or some sort of surround sound setup, this will already be converted to Ambix, and you can use the Soyuz plugin if you want, or you can use any other plugin that you want to decode this to surround sound. I'm not sure if the light version of the Soyuz plugin that you're going to download will let you decode this to Atmos or surround sound formats, but when you buy the mic, it'll come with a full version where you can do all that. So sorry to talk about all this stuff and waste a lot of time talking, but it's really important that you all understand that so you're able to utilize and decode and work with these files correctly. So having said that, here's the full montage of the song with my mix in stereo.
No one ever tells you moving to a small town you'll be everything wrong with the world outside those county lines. Everybody tries to sell you in a small town. Chemtrails to wedding bells and herbal remedies. A big Mary Kay SUV rolling coal in front of some hybrid freak with a California license plate. I've seen the Lord work in mysterious ways, move a heart stone. I've done my best to settle all these divides, but I'm still outside the city lines. Everybody's building churches in a small town. Truth will cost you 10%, but it could set you free. Tax deductible LLCs, Herbaheim's got nothing on the big JC. When we preach our love in dollar signs, to a third world place. White girl safaris lead to marital bliss. It's always how the stories go. I've seen the Lord work in mysterious ways, move a heart stone.
That was a stereo mix of the song that I did, recording all the sources with the Ambisonic mic, decoding them down to stereo, and just using them like I'm used to on normal microphones. So I think it's pretty obvious that you can do a lot of normal creative things with this Ambisonic mic when you understand how it works and decode it correctly. Getting that out of the way, now we kind of move into the section of this video where I want to show you a couple of really cool different implementations of this technology. This one, right now, I would say it probably doesn't have a happy ending and it's still up in the air, but let me tell you what I at least attempted to do. I bought a used 360 camera from Insta360. You can actually take these and upload 360 videos on YouTube and Facebook now, to where after you shoot, you can pan around in all directions after you've recorded, which is pretty nifty. But I figured, it would be even niftier if I could sync up the 360 camera with the Ambisonic mic and have a bunch of bluegrass players play with each other. You saw at the beginning of the video, you saw Sylamore Special playing around the Ambisonic mic, and that was just a stereo mix I did. That I didn't intend to actually do that video, but that was kind of a fallback and a plan B because I wasn't sure if this was going to work. So in theory, before I got all this stuff, it seemed like a very straightforward process, more or less. You record with your 360 video camera, and then I had the Soyuz Ambisonic mic above it so that they're really close together. And then after the fact, all I had to do in theory was to convert the Ambisonic mic to Ambix and output a 4-channel Ambix signal, sync that with the 360 camera, and then once you had that video processed, you have to get this thing called the Spatial Media Metadata Injector. It's a mouthful. I think it's something that Google's made, but basically this program injects metadata into your video file to tell it a few things. Well, 2 things actually. The first thing is, hey, this is a 360 video. The second thing that it should put in metadata-wise is, hey, this is 4 channels that are Ambix. Decode this to stereo correctly. Now, I'll save you a whole saga, but there were so many hurdles to get around what seemed like a very simple and straightforward process. Like, one of the big frustrating parts of this was that you absolutely have to use that injector, that metadata injector plugin. You have to use that to inject the file with that metadata specifically so that YouTube reads it correctly. That program doesn't run on the new Macs, and I've seen that some people make scripts for it to where you can go in and code and script it differently so it will open on the newer Macs, but I had to borrow a really old Mac laptop just to be able to use that injector plugin, which is just ridiculous. So I had talked to Alejandro from Audio Brewers before I did all this because he knows all this stuff. He's like the go-to guy when I have questions, but he had warned me that this probably wasn't going to work out because, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, which whenever someone tells me that, I'm just like, I bet if I follow the directions, it'll work out. It didn't. I followed the directions to a T. A lot of times it just didn't. It was really inconsistent. Like, at one point I uploaded the same file to YouTube 3 times and it processed it 3 different ways. Some browsers, it did something different than other browsers. So anyway, I digress. This seemed like a cool idea because what I wanted you to do was have the bluegrass band standing around the 360 camera, and on YouTube I wanted you to be able to pan around however you wanted and actually have the sound track with your head in real time. I swear, trust me, I have done this correctly. I followed all the directions. I'm a smart guy when I put effort into stuff. It just would not work. And I've seen other people upload similar videos where it worked, but I tried it a bunch of times. I finally kind of got it to work. I had someone on one Android phone confirm that they were able to get it to work on their phone. Everywhere else, it's up in the air. So I actually have a ticket open with Google and YouTube. I've talked to them. They confirmed that I did everything right with the file, and today is Friday and the mic's being released on Monday. So 3 days before you're seeing this video, YouTube is currently manually reprocessing the video to try to get this to work. And they said, you know, give it a few days and it might start magically working. So that's what we're up against. I am going to have a link to that 360 video that I did with the band. It's going to be synced to the Ambisonic mic, and there's no processing on the mic. You'll just hear the raw signal. If the file doesn't get processed correctly eventually, I would suggest at the very least, if you're on a Mac, watch the video on YouTube and Safari. At least on Safari, on the browser, I was able to watch it, and it at least decoded the 4-channel Ambix signal to stereo correctly. So when you look at the 360 video, you can visually pan around in it, but the audio will be fixed in stereo like you're looking at them. Same goes for all the phone apps. iPhone, it seems to be decoding the Ambix signal correctly, but it's fixed, so you can at least pan around. So I will link the video, but I'm going to keep it unlisted and just have the link in the video description. If for some reason it magically starts working at some point, I'll make it public, but honestly a little bummed about this one. It seemed like it would be a really cool way for people to really, you know, experience this mic in real time visually and audibly. I followed directions, it's just not working, which is unfortunate. But I do have another quick solution just for this video. Waves makes this thing called the NX Tracker. You attach this to the top of a pair of headphones, and they originally, I think they designed it to create virtual mix rooms where when you put on headphones, it seems like there's a nice pair of speakers in front of you. They also have an ambisonic part of this plugin to where it creates an ambisonic kind of environment for you, so that when you deal with an ambisonic mic, if I decode it correctly with the Waves plugin and put my headphones on, I can manually pan my head around and actually do a similar thing to what I tried to do with the video. So since it's still up in the air on whether or not the video is going to work, let me show you a quick video with audio to where you can listen in headphones and watch me pan my head around and hear what I'm hearing. So that's at least, you know, a backup plan. So take a look at that.
I could tell you
I'll probably end up doing a separate video on this at some point because it's definitely something I'm curious about and I need to experiment more before I start talking about it more. But one of the coolest things about Ambisonics is that it's an expandable format that can be translated to other formats pretty easily. And I know Dolby Atmos is getting pretty popular the last year or two. And so I think it's important to realize that ambisonic mics can be translated to Dolby Atmos pretty easily. When you're decoding this down to stereo, like we've heard for most of the video, you have to be a lot more selective and make choices in terms of where you want to focus what the mic has captured. So when you start expanding something like this into a surround sound format with lots of speakers, the sky's kind of the limit on how you choose to decode that, because you can actually utilize everything that this mic's captured. And, the front information that the mic captured can go on those speakers, back can go there, the top part can go up top. I mean, it can be literally like you are the ambisonic mic sitting in the room. So, having said that, again, I just wanted everyone to realize that. And if you have a Dolby Atmos setup with speakers, I'd be really curious to hear what you think when you start playing around with the files from the song I downloaded and expanding them into surround sound. I'd be curious to hear what you think. But what I'm going to do real quickly is that Dolby Atmos actually has a binaural render to where you can listen to it in headphones. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a few examples where I've decoded this to stereo, and you can hear a stereo mix of the ambisonic mic. And then I'm going to bring that signal into the Dolby Atmos world. I'm going to decode it into Dolby Atmos and bounce out the binaural bounce like you'd hear in your headphones. And we're going to compare those two. So for this section, it's really important that you put headphones on, because the Dolby Atmos binaural render is actually creating kind of a virtual room in essence that tries to trick your brain into hearing things coming from above your head and behind you and stuff. So it's important that you listen to this in headphones. But I'm going to give you a stereo example of the render from the 013A. And then I'm going to expand that out a bit inside of Dolby Atmos and let you hear the difference. I think that's probably a wrap. Thanks for sticking through the video. I know this was probably a bit of a longer one, but at the very least, for any of you that have never really messed with Ambisonics before, I wanted to give a little bit of a crash course in it and kind of just, scratch the surface and show you some cool potential uses for this outside of, just recording it and decoding it to stereo and mixing it into a song. tons of cool things that you can do with this. And I'm really excited to see this get into the real world and see more creative people use this and see what you do. Um, I think the brilliant thing that Soyuz has done is they've taken what is, in my opinion, the best sounding small cap in the world. Like, good Lord, the 013 FET is just an amazing sounding mic. And the cool thing about it is that it is a colorful sounding mic. You know, it's not a clinical sounding mic. And I would say most people making ambisonic mics right now are using a very clean, clinical sounding circuit. And so the brilliant thing that Soyuz has done here is that they have given you a colorful sounding paintbrush here and shoved it into just a beautiful body. This is by far the most beautiful ambisonic mic I've seen. And not only is it beautiful, but man, it sounds colorful. This is made for you to be creative and make music and make things that, you know, sound colorful as opposed to clinical. And so I'm hoping that a lot more creative people that make music are going to grab one of these and start messing around with it and do some really cool things with it. So definitely give one of these a try. Make sure you download the session files and, you know, decode them correctly and play around with them. I think once you get it into your DAW and start messing around with stuff, it's going to be really cool. So this is the 013A. Ambisonics is awesome. Grab one of these and do some cool stuff.